back in here on the Calling How I See It Sports Pod. Blake Terrence here with you. Eileen Marty here as well as Kyle Sullivan and Quentin James. All right, so talked a little March Madness. I think we'll switch over to football next because there's some recent news out NFL-wise today, some rule changes passed, a couple others tabled until May when the owners next meet. Nothing super Chief specific, so we'll just kind of dive into the two rules that have been changed. First one is a tweak of the touchback rule on the new dynamic kickoff that we saw last year. So you're still going to have the new kickoff formations with the new rules of the landing zone between the goal line and the 20. All that's the same as they're trying to increase the rate of returns. But, of course, the first stat I think of is the one I can't remember off the top of my head from the article, but basically they saw an increase in the overall rate of kickoffs being returned last year, but not as much as they would have liked. So they've responded to that by basically increasing the penalty for a touchback, not penalty as in a flag, of course, but you used to have the ball spotted at the 30-yard line on a kick that goes into or through the end zone. And then, of course, if it bounces in the landing zone and Zin goes in the end zone, apparently I'm doing the French pod today, that goes out to the 20. So they've changed the standard touchback. So if the kicker essentially overkicks it or chooses not to hit the landing zone, that's now going to be moved out to the 35. So that's a pretty notable change. Now you're basically at where the ball is spotted if a college kicker kicks it out of bounds. That ball is placed 30 yards from the kick, so that's placed at the 35, and you're only 5 yards back from where the ball goes if a NFL kicker kicks it out of bounds or if it fails to reach the landing zone. So, they're basically trying to disincentivize touchbacks. My personal opinion on this, and I'll let you guys weigh in here, I personally think this is more flash than substance. The kickoff in general is it's a guaranteed play to happen. You're always guaranteed at least two, no matter what the results are. But you only get so many a game. I bet some stat head could do a little research and figure out what the actual average number of kickoffs per NFL game is. I would assume it's probably somewhere in the 7 to 8 range. That might be a little high, but anyhow, it's not an overly common play. So, I think the discussion behind it, it's more off-season fodder, if you will, than I think it will be something we really talk about a ton during the season. But they are really trying to incentivize teams to return these kicks. What did any of you guys see last year on the kicks? You can weigh in on the specifics of the touchback rule, but that's not I kind of recapped that there. Did you think it made a difference? Do you think I'm an old man for that take? How are we feeling about this?
I kind of think it's one of those things where they're trying something. It got about 2-3 weeks into the season last year. We realized a lot of teams were just okay taking the penalty. That is, purposely kicking it out of bounds, having the ball at the 30, which defeated the whole purpose of the rule change, trying to get more kickoffs where guys actually return it. So
that's
I'm in
essentially what
favor.
they're trying to stop here.
Yeah, so I'm in favor of them trying this. I don't know if it'll work, if it'll lead to more exciting plays. Obviously, we saw a little bit better and more exciting returns, but it seems like the only alternative is to just get rid of the kickoff, which is kind of seems what we're heading to. So anything that we could do to avoid that, at least trying something different, I'm in favor of. Don't know if it'll work or have major results, but at least they're trying to do something to keep it alive is kind of my thought.
Okay, well, you touch on getting rid of the kickoff, and I don't necessarily want to go on the record as saying that that's what I want to happen. But why are we doing this with near universal support, and yet we table the whole 4th and 15 yards to go, modification to the onside kick? Where's the momentum on that? The onside kick was already a dumbass play. Now it's like completely, the recovery rate is, you're talking like 1% or 1 point something percent over the last 5+ years. And now it's even less so because there's absolutely no surprise element. You literally have to declare it. So I'm not even saying it has to be one or the other. I'm not saying get rid of the kickoff and just lean into I think you could do both. But I guess that's my frustration, is that we're tinkering with this, which was already kind of, like I said, more flash than substance. And yet, something that could, I think, truly be game changing, to allow, I think the original rule proposal was the game had to be tied or the team attempting it had to be trailing. So you couldn't try to do it to just sit on the ball. But, essentially you would run a play. I don't know where they would spot the ball. And, you know, you essentially have 15 yards to go. It's like a 4th and 15. It's one play where if you can convert it, get 16 plus yards, you get to keep the ball, I presume, at the spot of where the play ends in case you break a big one or score a touchdown, etc. So, not to take us to a whole different topic here, Q, you can weigh in on whatever you want now at this point, but I don't know, like, I guess it's not that I have a problem with the new kickoff or tweaking the rules. I just feel like there's an opportunity being missed there to make a change that actually might have real football impact.
Yeah, to Kyle's point, it feels like we're headed towards the death of the kickoff. They're just making little tweaks around the edges to try and bring it back to what it used to be. I mean, these changes originated with the goal of reducing injuries. I don't think you're ever gonna reduce injuries to a really meaningful effect on this kind of play. And I mean, you essentially are penalizing a team for kicking a touchback at this point. So you're just going to have guys, I guess, kicking it right to the end zone line or a little bit short of that to try and get them to return it.
Yeah, I mean
It's
it's a weird deal because now the perfect kick is essentially a line drive that takes a big bounce. It's almost like the
it's
exact
kind of like a
opposite of
squib.
right, like a squib with more oomph behind it. It's like the exact opposite of a punt. Because what you don't want
Yeah.
is the ball to bounce out of bounds, or I guess if it backspun, it necessarily wouldn't be the worst thing because once it hits the ground, the defense can move. So if it surprises the returner and it takes him a while to retrieve it, he's going to get pinned back deep. But yeah, that is the perfect kickoff that bounces before the end zone and then takes a huge bounce that nobody can reach and skips through the end zone. Because that's still, to my knowledge, that hasn't been changed. That goes out to the 20. So that's like an old-fashioned touchback
Mm.
or a punt slash, fumble interception in the end zone touchback. So there is a bit of strategy the kicker can still employ, but I don't know. I just what do you guys think about the specific for that rule was or that discussion was tabled along with the tush push ban proposal from the Packers, the proposal to have the 4th and 15 play. Again, I don't know. It's likely not even going to pass, so the specifics aren't that important. I believe the plan was that it would be ran from the 35 with midfield, so where you kick off from, with midfield being your target, right? So you have to get 15 yards to retain the ball, and then you would get the ball if you get it, if you achieve it. Let's say you got 18 yards and you got to the 47. Well, that's where you start your next possession. Um, do you don't you feel like that might be a better use of our time as NFL owners? Our time, I wish. Um, of time as NFL owners, though, of like, you know, what there's always a team trailing toward the end of a game. There's quite often tie ball games late, but the sheer odds that this kickoff stuff is going to affect an outcome of a game is pretty low. So, what do you guys think about the proposal to modify the onside kick and make that more of a true football play?
I think something's got to be done about the onside kick because, like you
So
said, it
stupid.
it almost never uh, it almost never
It's
succeeds,
literally
and
like a
you're
full court
essentially
heave in
leaving
basketball.
one
That's
of the
what it's
most important
analogous to.
plays of the game up to chance. And then really, that's all it is. There's very little skill involved. It is just the luck of the bounce.
Yeah.
At the end of
It,
the
It, wa-
game, it's
it
very anticlimactic when you
we talk about the
have,
Duke Butler half court heave, the Gordon Hayward thing. That's the kind of odds you're talking about. It's the odds of like a half court or beyond desperation heave at the buzzer going in. That's the kind of it's
yeah.
which I'm
Now,
not
fourth
saying it
and
should be.
15, I think, I don't know if that's quite difficult enough to simulate what the odds you're trying to make in that situation. Maybe you extend it to 20 yards or something like that. I could see a scenario where Pat Mahomes is able to convert that, I don't know, 30,
By
40% of the
scrambling.
time.
Yeah, yeah. Tyreek Hill
Um,
just becomes even more of a cheat code button than he already is. Like,
yeah,
because
so that, I
that's
mean that would that would be a rule change that would kind of fundamentally alter the end of NFL games going forward. So I think that's going to take some discussion and figuring out. I mean, you have to essentially figure out where you want to set the odds and come up with a play that simulates that. But I do think we need something that's a little more skill based than just kicking the ball on the ground and hoping it bounces to one of your guys.
Kyle, what you got?
Yeah, I think there is maybe a little more momentum for the onside kick just because there's no suspense to it now, as it currently is. You've taken the surprise element out of it. I think that's more likely in some ways than getting rid of the kickoff altogether. This might sound a little weird, but I just think the kickoff is such a ceremonial ordeal, such a traditional ordeal. At the end of the day, the NFL is a television show, and it just fundamentally changes the look and the vibe of every single start to every drive, start to every game. There's just such a large build up to that moment. Again, maybe that's something people get used to after half a season to change, but I think that's a big part of this is just being making use of that or getting used to that adjustment. Right? There's no more Devin Hester's, there's no more Dante Halls, there's no more Josh Cribbs. Those guys they're gone from the NFL. They're a dead breed,
Hey,
but we
don't talk
still
about
enjoy
Sky
the
Moore like that.
That's Kadarius Tony. All right, don't get him flipped. Don't get him. He had the big Super Bowl return. But yeah, that's why I think the
We'll
onside
always
kick.
have
That
punt
just
returns. That's
yeah,
a,
that's fair.
no, so
That's
there's
fair.
still return plays.
That's an
But
interesting point you make, though, Kyle. Marty, you jump in here. As more of a football player fan than a football nerd. I know we might lose you a little bit when we get into the minutia of rules, but he made an interesting point there about the kickoff being maybe it actually won't go away because it's such a ceremonial part. I mean, it's literally in the lingo we use. Like the game kicks off at noon. As more of a casual football fan, how much do you agree with that? Would you feel weird if you just turned on the game opening day next year, or it wouldn't happen next year, but in a year or two, and they just like, oh yeah, the kickoff is no more. They don't kick off anymore. They just put the ball at a spot. Do you agree with that? Do you think there is like an important ceremonial normalcy aspect to a kickoff play?
Okay, well, let me just say I'm not a casual football fan. I am a college football fan. I follow the
Okay.
NFL, fine, but if you want to ask me about KU football, we can talk about that all day.
Okay.
Okay,
Fair enough.
that's where my priorities lie. So, waiting for that season to start. Pro Day just happened, blah, blah, blah. Great things for KU are coming. But on to,
We'll get into the
regular
KU
football.
Mizzou matchup too. Don't worry.
We'll see what happens. But I do feel I agree with everything Kyle said. It is a ceremony. Even I agree with safety, but sometimes safety and exciting and fun don't always match up. There's already so much rough and tumble. I'm not trying to pansy football in any way, but there's been a lot of things that have come that are not great out of things that have happened during football games because of the impacts that people have against each other. So minimizing those, it's fine, but the way they're trying, you can't have the fun, exciting stuff if we're trying to keep it safe like that. But it does feel like an integral part of the entire thing. Like, it just feels weird to be like, okay, you guys are just going to start at the 35, like, put the ball down, let's go. Like, there's no fanfare to it. It wouldn't feel the
Hmm.
same. So I think even if we know that it's going to start at the 35 anyway, why not do a kickoff, make it no contact, whatever. It's just like a ceremonial thing at this, start of the game, start of the half, that kind of thing. We don't really need it probably for, after a touchdown, if we want to, unless we want to, do something else there, maybe then we can just put it down on the line. We maybe
I
don't do
actually had a similar thought. Maybe, it would be weird to not have it at the start of the game or at the start of a half,
Mm-hmm.
but maybe at change of possession after a score, then you start at the 25 or whatever.
Yes,
So
yeah,
you still get the kickoff at the start of the game and start of play in the second half, but you just kind of get rid of it
yeah,
after change of possession.
yeah. It's
Yeah, I
definitely
don't think. Go ahead.
last. So.
Yeah, I don't think Dave Tobes of the world would be very fond of that because, those opportunities are their lifeblood, so that they wouldn't be happy with it being reduced. And you all brought up safety a couple different times. For what it's worth, in the articles I was reading, in the 1 year sample size we have of the new dynamic kickoff, the injury rates were, according to the NFL, not markedly higher on those plays than they were on any other given play. So the outsized risk on the kickoff, they do appear to have mitigated that by not allowing players to move until the ball is caught or lands. So I think that issue might have been mostly solved as it is. Um, and it's a funny thing because now we transition to the overtime rule changes. This isn't even really a statement in support or opposition to that, but Marty kind of made an interesting point that it's like sometimes we go overboard in things that are supposedly meant to target player safety, and then sometimes we do things that run directly counterintuitive to that, like making overtime more. Like, yeah, let's take this game that's already dragged on longer than normal and make sure there's two possessions on each side of the ball. Honestly, if I have a reason that I'm opposed to this rule, it really has nothing to do with player safety or football really at all. It's that it's the second time we've seen an overtime rule change after the Bills get mad about it. Now, that's probably coincidence. That's what the logical person in me says. But I'll never get over how, Q, I think, you and me, and I think we were watching that game with your dad, the very first AFC Championship game, the loss to Brady, the no defense game, talking about how pissed we were that that's how the game ended. Mahomes never even got to touch the ball in overtime. And, we go on Twitter and talk about it, and everybody's calling us sore losers and just bitter Chiefs fans. And then 3-4 years later, the Chiefs do it to the Bills, and it's like, oh, such bullshit. How could Josh Allen not be allowed to? And I'm just like, you guys are going to kill me. And, of course, that offseason, it changes. And then 2 years later, the Bills get mad about it again. And now it's the one thing I will say, it eliminates any confusion. The Chiefs won't have any chance to have the 49ers not know the overtime rules the next time they play them in the Super Bowl. Regular season and playoff overtime rules, the exact same now. Playoff overtime will still be 15 minutes, whereas regular season will remain at 10. That'll be the only difference. But you're going to have both teams get the opportunity to possess the ball regardless of what the first team does. I don't know if you guys have any hot takes or jokes on the specifics of that. Feel free, but I kind of want to talk about real quick the implications of what it would mean for an overtime game, especially with them keeping it. Originally this proposal to essentially even out the overtimes actually did include restoring it to a 15-minute, so making it exactly like playoffs. They eliminated that part, so it's staying at 10, but the possession rules are now playoff style. I think you're going to see a lot of teams go for two, especially the first team that gets a touchdown, because that essentially guarantees that you can't lose that game, or at least not on the following possession, right? And it essentially means that you're going to get the ball back, hopefully with at least a minute or two to try to get in for a sudden death field goal. Now, of course, if you miss the 2-point conversion, then the other team only needs to kick an extra point to beat you. So there's a chess game going on there. But if we're talking about like things that we think, trends we're going to see that we can attribute to this change, that's the one that immediately jumps out to me is because it's only a 10-minute period, there's a very realistic possibility that is only two possessions. You know what I mean? And a drive in the NFL can take 5 minutes easily. So I think you're going to see a lot of teams that score a touchdown, the one that possesses the ball first. I think you're going to see teams going for two to essentially try to clinch the game right then. What do you guys think?
My first thought was the same thing you said, where they'll talk about safety in one area, like how 17th, 18th game is too much, these kickoffs are dangerous, but now we're okay with
Yeah.
extending out overtimes. That was always kind of the excuse before, is like, let's
Hey,
not
but
kill
it's okay
ourselves in the
because we're
regular
bouncing it.
season.
We get rid of a preseason game when we do that.
Yeah,
So
yeah. But there are obviously stats behind the team who wins the coin toss having a lot more success, but ultimately, like, that doesn't change that. You know what I mean? The team who wins the coin toss is still going to have the advantage. They're still going to kind of control the destiny of this. Like your defense still has to get a stop to
Yeah.
win the game. So it's like
Though
you
now you
can't
would choose
keep.
defense first. That would
Well,
be
you can't.
another major change.
You can't keep alternating. I mean, your defense has to get a stop, is what it ultimately comes down to. If they maybe wanted to, like I said, just keep this for the playoffs, it makes some sense. But I just don't get how this changes things ultimately. We cater so much to the offense, and I'm really, truthfully, I'm okay with it. Makes for a good TV show, good TV product. But this is like one of those few things where it's like, okay, we can make defense matter in one part of the game, and I don't have strong opinions on it. I guess one way or the other. I think you're gonna still be in that same boat of whoever wins the coin toss. You're gonna feel a lot better about winning the game ultimately.
To me, the answer is easy. It's right in front of you. Eileen, as a college fan, probably are aware of this, but I think the college way of doing overtime is vastly superior to anything the NFL has ever done. You give both teams a possession with untimed, no time on the clock. You just start them at the 35. Maybe in the NFL, you start them at the 50 so that there's a chance they miss a
Yeah, because
field
it's
goal
it's
if
the
they don't get a
25 in
first down.
college, which hell for Division One you already kind of are too. But the NFL,
I think it's
I mean,
35.
is it 30? I'm
I think it is.
Kyle or Marty do a fact check thing because I'm sticking my position here too. I'm pretty sure it's 25. Maybe it
It
changed
was back in
recently.
the day,
Regardless,
unless
I
it
mean
changed.
that's a small detail, but
But I
there's
agree,
been
you'd have to
so
start it at
many
midfield. Yeah.
there's been so many fun college overtime games that have gone and
Yes.
to the player safety aspect of it. Okay, probably not the best, but come on, this is the NFL we're talking about. They're not really serious about that.
Yeah.
I think you're gonna see. I mean, it would be must see TV. The way overtime is set up right now makes no sense. It never has. The first score winning in overtime was stupid. And now giving both teams the possession, that's fine, but you're going to limit the time that they have. So one team can drive down in 8 minutes and leave two for the other team. It's just nonsense. Just
Better than
give
the
them
days
both
when
the
it
ball.
used to be a field goal. You remember that? That feels like 30 years ago
Oh,
now. It
yeah.
wasn't that long ago, but yeah, you just get one chunk
It's
play and kick a
incredible.
field goal.
I mean, how can they not figure this out?
Yeah.
It's beyond me.
I remember when the Raiders had Sebastian Janikowski, like they were a shitty team, but they were like undefeated in his career, or at least for like his first 10 years in overtime. And they had like three overtime games. Like they had a span of 3 years where they won like a total of 8 games in 3 years. And three of them were overtime games, which Janikowski won for them. And I believe in two of those three, they ran 4 plays or fewer. Like they were 50 some yarders. Yeah,
Always
those
looking
were the days.
like he trotted out of the stands with his beer gut
With it, yeah, yeah,
just
yeah.
hit 50-yard bombs regularly. What a throwback name there.
I do prefer the college overtime rules. One of the most exciting games that I've experienced is the KU Arkansas. What was it? Liberty Bowl in Memphis. I was at that game. That's one of the craziest things I've ever done for a football game. Is worked all day, drove there overnight, went to the game, and then drove home the next day to go back to work the next day. Absolutely ridiculous, but super fun. But at the end of that game, there was what, 5 overtimes, and after like the second one, it's just 2 point conversions.
Mm-hmm.
And so many of them, and it was you just Arkansas had like a 90 some odd% chance to win when the fourth quarter was ticking down, and KU came back, tied it up, and then here we are. Just nobody expected it to happen. It was crazy. Again, yeah, player safety. You
Yeah.
know, uh,
I was also at that game. Luckily, it was low security because I had left the
yeah,
stadium, was waiting on an Uber, and was checking the updates on my phone. And my brother
yeah,
and I were able to just run back into the stadium.
yeah. We left early. We watched it on our way home. Well, not home, back to the hotel. I said we shouldn't leave, but well, I wasn't the only one with a voice, so I left, and now they won't ever leave a game early again because you just never know what's going to happen.
Yeah,
You
I
just
think
never.
the two things you're going to run into there are player safety with it not being timed and, a game that could go on for so much longer. And I think the NFL values its record books. And, the thing about the college overtime is you can have a game, let's say, that's tied at 24 at the end of regulation. And if they can't break the tie, the final score ends up being something like 51-48. Right. And I think the NFL is, protective of its old stats and records as well. And you'd have a lot of records falling cheaply. Now, of course, overtime games might already have some sort of asterisk there, but I think those are the two biggest things you're going to run. By far, the bigger one being that's the purpose, Q. Like, I see what you're saying. Like, I think I I originally started asking about whether we could do some sort of modified version because I agree with you. You'd have to start them in midfield. You kind of already are in Division One, but truly in the NFL, you're already in field goal range if you start at even the 35, if that's really what it is. I mean, you got to start outside of a reasonable field goal range. But then when there's no time on the clock and it just goes purely off of possessions, then the game can go on forever. And I don't even know necessarily that that's actually truly what's most detrimental to player safety. I think we all agree the NFL talks out of both sides of its mouth there. So it'll be interesting to see, what kind of chess and strategy and clock management we see on the overtime rule. All right. I don't want to spend a ton of time on this last one before we transition to baseball because I don't think it's going anywhere. I personally think this is a huge nothing burger, but the Packers put forth the proposal to try to ban the tush push, brotherly shove, whatever you want to call it. I thought the funniest part here was Sean McDermott, the coach of the Bills, being one of the biggest supporters of the Packers' motion, even though he started leaning quite heavily into it this past year as well. Not quite to the same degree that the Eagles have, but, Josh Allen, a similar, huge body quarterback with a lot of strength. Likes to go over the top of scrums. So you saw the Bills put it to use a little bit. It's funny talking about this as a Chiefs fan because it couldn't be further from relevant for us because the Chiefs don't even have a quarterback sneak play in their playbook. They just call it kneecap and they don't run it. It's one of those locked things that you have to like unlock an old Madden mode or whatever. But there is no key. They threw away the key. There will be no quarterback sneaks for the Chiefs. So it's pretty irrelevant for the league. But, I mean, I don't know. Like, even the NFL vice president can't make a coherent argument as to why it should be a thing. Like the closest he came to saying was like, is it really what football is supposed to look like, or does it look more like a rugby play? Okay, well, first of all, you have rugby players coming over. Generally, they've been specialists, but now you even have Philadelphia's starting left tackle was a damn rugby player. So I don't know why we're throwing shade and catching strays of rugby here, but also,
They're actually
like,
pretty similar sports.
well,
You
yeah,
come down to it.
and not to mention that is like, come on, like, I feel like I already sound like an old man half the time on this podcast, but like, go back and watch a damn football game from before you were born or something. That is that is old fashioned football. Now,
Yeah.
the getting behind him and shoving his butt, that is a unique twist they've put on it, but it's not that different.
You-
Like,
You've
I
seen
don't,
that. You've seen that though in plays. It gets the crowd going. Is if a running back or a receiver catches it, runs 5 or 6 yards. There's sort of a little bit of a pile in the scrum. Guys run up behind him and start shoving them for an extra yard or
yeah.
two. I mean, it's a play that's been around, but yeah, I think it would be. I mean, it's beaten dead horse, but I think it would be a problem if a bunch of teams got really good at it, because then it would make for a bad TV product. But since it's kind of a one or two teams that have done well with it, I just don't see
Eh.
it moving anywhere in the short term.
I don't even necessarily agree with that because, I mean, I don't know that it was a full blown tush push that they stopped, but the Chiefs stopped a very similar. One of their stops on Allen in the championship game was on a play very much like that, wasn't it? A fourth and
Yeah, but
one.
the Bills aren't the Eagles. That's the problem. The Eagles are so good at it that it's bad TV. But that they're a one of 32 teams that are
Well, and
like
quite
that.
frankly,
So
they still are the kings of it, but there was a notable drop in its effectiveness when Jason Kelsey retired too. So even they aren't at the heights they used to be. And I don't know, I'm generally about as new school as they come. I want to see the onside kick become an actual play. Like I'm very in favor of most modern rules, but it's like if a violent scrum in football is not how football is meant to be played, we ain't watching the same sport. Like I don't know what we're doing.
What's
But
interesting, Blake, I was listening to Charles Robinson of Yahoo Sports on Inside Coverage in their podcast, and he was telling me part of them withdrawing this was that they had kind of gotten wind that this vote was going to lose like in a major way, and it was going to be in such a way that it was like this was such a big, not a close vote at all, so we're just done with it. They'll never bring it up again. So now that he thinks the hope is to bring it up, maybe when the Eagles aren't fresh off a Super Bowl win, try it again in 3 or 4 years, see if it has more momentum, or maybe even as soon as a year or two. But the problem was it was going to lose in such a landslide that it was going to be like, why would we
I
even
don't.
waste our time bringing it up again? But apparently
I think
it's,
that's what we're going to end up saying anyway.
yeah,
To be
yeah.
honest, like, and I also think it's funny that this is when they like. Well, I think partially it was because the Chiefs ended up winning the game, but it might have been more relevant 2 years ago because the Eagles used that play multiple times to convert short yardage situations in that game when it was close. It really wasn't that. I'm not sure they attempted a tush push in this past Super Bowl, did they? Because they were never. The game was never all that much in doubt. The timing doesn't make sense either. I just, like, I personally think that this is showmanship, for lack of a better term. Like, and like, why the Packers? Like, they're not even
Got to
like
play them.
it's
Got
not
to
it's
play them
it's
in the
not
NFC
Jerry
every year.
Jones. It'd be one thing if it'd be like Jerry Jones being himself and trying to be difficult here, and he's an Eagles in division rival. I just don't even know why this carries momentum. So let's put this where it goes in the wastebasket of the past and move on. All right, final NFL rule change I want to talk about before we transition over to baseball here. Um, Kyle, I know you're kind of the opinion, sort of like I was on the kickoff thing, that this might be more flash offseason fodder-ish stuff than true game-changing substance, but significant change to how we're going to see the game officiated. So, uh, first downs will now be determined by the Hawkeye camera system that's widely used in a variety of other sports. It's a Sony invention. I assume there was probably a better example, but I got really into tennis for a minute during the pandemic. I watched a ton of tennis matches, and so I got very familiar with the Hawkeye system there. Um, so that's what's going to determine the down and distance and whether a player's achieved the line to gain. So there will be no more chain gangs. Now, the ball, this is a tweak or a quirk I didn't even realize until I was reading about this in the prep, is that the spot of the ball is still going to be done by a human, right? So, I mean, they're essentially neutered in some ways, right? Like because they're essentially spotting the ball where the Hawkeye tells them to, kind of like how we might see in the next year or two with the balls and strikes in baseball, where there's no sense yelling at the umpire because he's not only is the call potentially reversible, but it's not discretionary. He's doing what a system told him to do. So it's an interesting little combination of things, but certainly the biggest change is that you're going to see the first down or the down and distance rather being determined by a camera system, which the officials then just execute. Um, Kyle, I think your biggest, I guess, objection or pumping the brakes on this was, that you didn't think it was actually going to solve a lot of the controversial first down or not kind of type of calls. Anything, do you think does it improve the quality of the game though by it being more determined in real time instead of eyeballed? That's kind of where I first landed.
I don't think it drastically hurts or helps the game. Like you said, I think it's a lot of off-season jazz hands. It sounds good. People have been begging for chips in the balls for a long time, and Hawkeye, I think some sports nerds are familiar with that. I believe that's also what is used to calculate launch angles, which is all the rage in baseball right now.
That's
Uh,
StatCast. That's their own
okay, there,
system, but
see,
it
there
works
we go.
very
Can't,
similarly. But
got the baseball nerd in the house correcting me on that. But yeah, so it
same concept.
effectively, yeah, it measures the ball to the first down marker. So it doesn't solve the issue of where the ref actually places the ball. So when you get in a giant scrum, fighting for that first down marker. The
Speaking
ref
of
is
tush
still has
push,
yeah, the ref still has to dive in that pile and kind of guess where the spot is. And so rather than having the chain gang run out with the chains to measure it next to the ball, the camera will just automatically execute it next to the ref spot. So if anything, we were joking in the text before, there's a little bit of theater in the umpires, the refs on the sidelines, like running those chains out there. The giant zoom in on the camera in high def. Again, not a huge loss or anything, but really kind of a non-factor is the way I kind of when you read into the details of it because it's not a chip in the ball yet. It sounds like they don't have that technology. You're still dependent on refs trying to determine where the ball is after a giant dog pile, essentially.
now I'm curious. This is obviously a question, wanting the visual perspective that you guys have that I don't. Could Hawkeye still have a better chance of getting that correct than a human trying to A, not get himself killed in the middle of the scrum, and then B, trying to figure out where the hell the ball went? I mean, obviously a camera's view is going to be impeded by the scrum as well, but couldn't I don't know. Is that just making yourself feel better to say the camera is going to make sure to get it right every time, or do you think that really could be an added element that like the camera still might get a better view?
I mean, I guess we'll find out. I feel like we do all the time see in challenges and replays where there's not enough evidence to overturn what's on the field. And I think you're just going to get a whole lot of that where,
Don't even get me
where
started
would,
on that.
yeah, when was the ball, where did the player have the ball when his knee touched the ground? Oh, we can't tell because there are three guys on top of him. Or did the ref have the perfect angle for it? So you're going to kind of, I think, still have those same issues. Maybe I'll be proven, wrong on that. Maybe those Hawkeye cameras weren't anywhere on the field before, but I think it's more of when you get in those giant scrums that you're trying to locate where the ball is when the player actually gets his knee down, his shoulder down, elbow down, whatever it is. It's just tough for a ref to make that out when you're fighting for inches.
The bane of my damn existence. The call stands. Hate that. Anyhow, Q, you feel any more optimistic that's kind of the biggest thing that I wonder is like, could the camera, because it has that bird's eye or the hawk's eye view of the play? I mean, again, like when you have four guys on top of each other, I'm sure that makes it harder, but maybe the camera can get a better angle or, a better view into the scrum than a human trying to also avoid the bodies flying could. I mean, do you feel any more optimistic or
Um, no, I think we're gonna want the that GPS tracking or whatever the chip inside the ball,
I mean, yeah,
because
that's the real salute. That's what solves everything. So,
it does it, and it's surprising to me that they don't say they don't have the technology. That seems like
cop out.
stick an Apple AirTag in there and call it good.
Inside the Apple AirTag, like I'm sure we can shrink it down.
Yeah, just put it
I
inside
wonder
the
if the
ball.
technology being I don't know who's the techiest of the group here. So anybody feel free to chime in here. I wonder if the technology has to do with that because like I don't know about microchips very much, but like Apple AirTags, we're all familiar with those. Those are relatively precise, as in like if you've lost your suitcase and it tagged and somebody got clever and tried to steal it and bring it home, you'd be able to tell not only what street they lived on, but which house was theirs. But you couldn't
Mhm.
necessarily tell whether the suitcase was hidden in the basement or in the attic. Right, like
No,
so.
I was being
I wonder if
facetious
the
with the
precision.
AirTag,
I
but I
wonder.
think
Well, yeah, but I wonder if that's the
there's
issue.
got to be a more
Is the
accurate
precision?
chip out there that could really, pinpoint
Yeah, but you're
where the
talking
location
blades of
is.
grass, man. I bet that is why the technology's not there. If that's true, I mean, I
Not a
could fully
perfectly
believe the
round ball is
NFL's
what
just
I don't know if
sounds like
you've
a
read into
personal
that too.
problem, huh?
No, I don't know if you've read into that, but that's part of it too. Is like the shape of the ball. I guess they struggle with the chip, but yeah, it's all the smart people are in baseball, like we'll kind of talk about later, I guess. But not enough
You could
smart
have just
analytical
stopped right
minds in
there. All the
football.
smart people are in baseball.
Well, and the other thing about the chip is it doesn't solve the issue of when is a player down. if the guy
Yeah.
is totally surrounded by a scrum of players and you can't see where his knee is, then it doesn't really make a difference where the ball is because you need to know when he was down.
Right,
So
Or
because
even
if
if
he
you
maybe
try,
that's why
stretches
they're
it
kind of
out,
slow walking it.
yeah, because if he stretches it out after his knee hits the ground, that doesn't count. You're right. So
Right. I mean,
you'd have
and if you're
the knee or the elbow are just as important as where the ball is.
and then you get into trying to line up like the clock with the cameras with the chip, and then you start to just have these long review processes that kind of ruin the
Which we don't have
television
enough
product.
of
So
in
yeah.
sports right now.
no, no. You know, the, that's another thing that if there's one thing that has made the March Madness not high quality basketball, it's like, you know, I remember him joking about it on the radio broadcast where I think it was the Houston Purdue game where Purdue used its last timeout with like 3 minutes left. And they're like, oh my God, Matt Painter just screwed up royally. He's not going to have any chance to gather his players and call. Well, the officials went to the table to review 4 different plays in the last 3 minutes, and all of those took more than 2 minutes apiece. So he got like bonus timeouts on bonus time. I mean, yeah, that's a great point. It's another reason that we can't go overly complicated because, you know, the last 2 minutes of a game take about the length of the first quarter damn near at times. So I agree with that. That's a big reason that we can't do that.
Hey folks, Blake Terrence here. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Calling It How I See It Sports Pod. Please make sure to like and comment on this video, subscribe to the channel, share it far and wide on all your social medias to help us grow our audience. And of course, make sure to turn those notifications on so you find out right away when we drop more content in the future. Appreciate you, man, and stay tuned to the Calling It How I See It Sports Pod.